Good evening, everyone. This is Faith's channel. Happy Wednesday night. So that being said, let's get into it. So I'm going to talk today about feelings in our mind and how they dictate the way we feel, because they're called feelings. Also, my hair is curly, everyone, so take note of that. Okay, so I want to start with the feeling of guilt. Guilt/regret. I feel like in this world and today, maybe even in this moment for some of you, we have this feeling of guilt, and it can be for something that you shouldn't feel guilty for. But the point is, you shouldn't feel guilt for something. Well, okay, so like if you did something wrong, you feel guilty about that. That's valid. That's, I guess, fine. But regret comes from the devil, because you are taking the concept of the now or the future even, and you're letting regret and all those feelings come in, and they're not valid because there's no reason to worry whatsoever. Okay. God's got you in his hand. So I want to talk about that a little bit in depth. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to regret absolutely everything. I used to regret, like, if I made a little mistake, or if I, went to the wrong party, or just different things. And I feel like that's something we need to talk about, because regretting, it seems so valid in our minds, because we're like, oh my gosh, like I did that. I regret it. I want to go back. I was weak in that moment, all that stuff. But it's like, if you think about it in God's perspective, first of all, three things. First of all, when you're weak, that's when God takes over. And we've talked about this before. When you're at your weakest and you feel like you can't do anything, call upon God. And it doesn't mean you're being weak. It means you need help. And I think that's really interesting, because we're never really weak. We just need God. And through God, we can do all things through God who gives us strength. So I think that's interesting. Number two, when you are regretting something, there's usually some sense of guilt that's invalid. Like, it just means like you're getting regretful about absolutely nothing, not nothing, but just in proportion, it just doesn't work. And then number three, it's just, you're in this moment. You're not in the present moment, and God is in the present moment. So from God's view of earth, he sees you regretting the past. What you really should be like focused on is the future and what's happening right now. Because in the past, so I used to have OCD super bad. I wish I would have came out and talked about this when I actually had it. In a way, I don't even want to think about it. But I had OCD so bad to where if I didn't do one of my OCD thoughts, I immediately regretted it. I immediately went into this internal like thinking and ruminating, and it was horrible. So I would encourage you, if you are feeling like regretful about absolutely anything, turn to God. And not just weirdly like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, God made you. He knows you. He knows you better than you know yourself. So when you're having these moments of guilt and regret, and, it's good to feel guilt if you did something wrong, but you need to confess it and you need to move on. You can't just be in this stage of just fright or whatever you want to call it. It's just not healthy. Another thing I really wanted to talk about today was motivation again. I think motivation is a very big topic, and I think that's why it keeps coming up in my mind, because motivation is what moves us, what makes us go. And I always tell like my therapist and like my sisters or whoever that I rule this world, and they're like, why do you say that? And I'm like, because I know how to motivate people. I know how to inspire people. And I know how to get people moving. And how do people move? But through inspiration. So in that way, I rule the world. But I honestly feel like everyone has that gift. And if you don't have that gift, you have the gift of whatever, talent, anything like that. Everyone is really, really special in God's eyes. And I'm not just saying that, they are. Like for me, when I was a teen, I always believed I had no purpose in this life. I was suicidal, all that stuff. And one day it popped in my head, no, you are an inspiration to people. And ever since then, I just feel like I'm on top of the world. Not ever since then. I've had my bad days. But I feel like it's so true. Like, if we live the way God sees us, we're going to have a much better life. And there's another reason I say that God really loves us. If you read in the Bible, God says, my thoughts towards you are countless as the sand on the seashore. So that means God is constantly thinking about you. He wants what's best for your soul. And it's not like you're drowning in misery and, contempt and all this stuff. And God's just like watching on the stern like, oh man, that's her. There she goes again. No, that's not what's going on. There are days, well, not anymore, but there were days where I would be like, okay, God is not watching me. He is not knowing what's going on. He's letting this happen. He might be letting it happen, but